Good morning and welcome to the Peorian. I'm your host, Paul Gordon. For the true fan of what may be America's dirtiest and bloodiest sport, politics, the real season has begun. With the Iowa caucuses tipping it off January 3rd and the New Hampshire primary following a week later, the presidential election season is underway. It happens every 4 years and it holds the attention of politics watchers like no other season. Even the elections held in between presidential runoffs are referred to as off-year elections. Not all election seasons are that exciting. This year, for example, there is an incumbent in the White House who will have no opposition on his way to the Democratic nomination. And for all the hoopla and fun that marked the preseason events among Republican candidates, one has to wonder how long the race to the GOP nomination will last, especially after the results from Iowa and New Hampshire were posted. Last week, we discussed the GOP strategy with Rudy Lewis, chairman of the Peoria County Republicans. This week, the Democrats get a turn. As I mentioned, they have the current White House resident. Can he hold on for 4 more years? And can the Democrats make inroads into Congress? My guest this week is Billy Halstead, chairman of the Peoria County Democrats. We'll get his thoughts about this election season after these messages. Welcome back to the Peorian. My guest today is Billy Halstead, chairman of the Peoria County Democratic Party. Billy, thank you for joining us today. It wasn't but a few months ago that the Republican candidates for president were all saying we have no other opponent but Barack Obama. That was before his approval ratings started to improve, before the economy started showing signs of improvement, and before the Americans' disgust with Congress really became evident. So how would you describe the climate right now with the Republican candidates and President Obama?
Well, I think it's obvious, Paul, that President Obama had a vision, and he's got a plan. And you can't implement the plan overnight. So at one point in time, it looked like things were at a stall, maybe even going down a little bit. So it's easy to jump on that and say he's failing. But once the plan comes into place and starts moving and starts, things start reacting to his plan, things turn around a little bit. And at the same time, the Republican Party's candidates started with their plans, and unfortunate for them, it was against each other. So I think it was a combination of things. Mainly the president's plans come into place, and also with their candidates fighting amongst each other.
Even though they all kept saying our only opponent's Barack Obama, they couldn't help but to attack each other, similar to what the Democrats did in 2008.
Right.
But it did seem like every time the Republican candidates turned around, one of them was shooting themselves in the foot, and it was usually the person who became the front runner.
Right.
Does either party, at this early stage in the election season, have an advantage in your opinion? Do the Democrats have an advantage because they've got their incumbent sitting in the White House?
What I think we do, for the simple reason is, the incumbents in most elections are the favorites. It's similar to sports, home field advantage. But at the same time, in politics, you have things that they can attack you on. You have votes, you have whatever the case may be, programs, different things that you've implemented, different things that you've done. For one prime example is Obamacare, that we've heard so much about. Something that they want to just, sink their hooks into to try to tear down. And so I think once it's proven that this healthcare program that President Obama is implemented and has worked hard on, along with a lot of other people in the United States Senate, I think it's going to give us somewhat of an advantage down the road.
It still seems like there's an awful lot of work to do with Congress. What does the Democratic Party have to do to make sure that President Obama gets 4 more years and that your party either regains some seats in Congress or maybe even regains control?
Well, unfortunately, right now with Congress, it's somewhat embarrassing to our country, I believe, because it's, as we've seen, there's no compromise, absolutely zero compromise. And it doesn't matter if you go back and look at some of the things, our good friend here in Peoria, Senator Durbin, who's been here and brought assets here many, many times, you have to work across the aisle. Mm-hmm. You have to get together and work across the aisle for things that you believe in and things that are good for our country. And unfortunately, right now, Congress isn't doing that.
But how much of that is a reflection on the president, that he can't make that happen?
Well, if you can't force someone to flip the light on. You can't go over there. You can do your best to convince them, convince the nation, convince the people of the United States of America what good this, whatever it might be, whether it be the extension of the tax break or, any of that kind of stuff. You can try to educate the public and say, this is what we need. But at the same time, you're still not in that majority in the Congress that is saying no. No to everything. No, no, no.
Will that be something, though, that the Republicans are going to hit on by the time November rolls around, that this president was not able to bring together a coalition, bring together compromise?
And I'm sure it is, and they've already said that. Mm-hmm. But why is it that we have that compromise on the Senate? We have it on the Senate. They've come together and supported the president on certain things, but we can't get into Congress in the majority because they have the majority. We can't get that done there. Why is that?
Okay, that's a good question.
Yeah, why is it? Well, it's because they don't want it. They don't want the president to survive. They don't want him to be reelected. And that's one way, if they continue to do that, that's another tool that they can use that this president, like you mentioned, this president hasn't been able to get that done.
Okay.
Once they compromise, they can't use that anymore. They can't say, well, this president couldn't get that done because he did, whether it be on one issue, two issues, or whatever.
When we come back, we're going to talk about some area congressional races, especially considering the disdain the public feels for Congress these days. Stay tuned. Welcome back to the Peoria, and I'm with Billy Halstead, chairman of the Peoria County Democrats. Billy, right before we took the break, we were talking about the Republican candidates for president. Mm-hmm. Any surprise so far to you? I mean, okay, we've had the Iowa caucuses, and we are, of course, taping this right before the New Hampshire primary. Did the Iowa caucus results surprise you at all?
Not really, because honestly, I thought anything could happen. I thought Romney would be there, mm-hmm. But I thought besides that, anything could happen. And I went to Iowa and participated in a caucus during the Obama campaign.
Okay.
And was actually there on caucus night. Senator Shadid and I and Senator Kaler, we went over. Went door to door, brought people to the polls.
Really?
And it was very interesting. It's an interesting system. So seeing how that works and knowing how close things were, everything was coming together very close, mm-hmm. I knew anything could happen.
Is there any Republican candidate, more than any other, that the Democrats are fearing come November?
No. On the flip side of that, I'm not sure there's one that we could possibly even work with. In my opinion, for the simple reason is, Senator Romney.
Governor Romney.
Governor Romney he's kind of out there a little. He doesn't, especially, he's claimed to be too moderate mm-hmm. to a degree. Mm-hmm. But is he going to? He hasn't proven that he can work with us, that he will work with us. With his, bashing of the president and trying to beat him, Instead of saying, how are you going to bring jobs to the United States of America? How are you going to do that? I haven't heard that yet. And obviously the Ron Paul, which we've known forever. What's amazing about Ron Paul is he's getting the younger voters,
Yes.
like President Obama did.
Yes.
So I'm not sure that there's, in my opinion, there's one fear level more for one than the other right now.
But is there a candidate that your party does not want to see running against President Obama
Yes.
in November?
Newt Gingrich.
Why?
Because of what he did as a speaker. I mean, he wasn't for the working class people. He didn't work for the working class people, and he was pretty, it was pretty apparent.
Could he beat President Obama?
Well, I don't think so, and I think it's shown now with what's going on with his campaign and the way that it's getting so heated right now. So I think, as you've seen, like Romney, he's going to get the 25% Republican, just like he just did in the caucus. Same exact thing he did last time. He's going to get that. The new guy on the block.
Santorum?
Yeah, Santorum is probably as much, going to be the candidate than the rest of them, because he sure escalated, didn't he? Real quick.
Very quick,
Very
almost too quick.
quick.
Will his bubble burst just as quickly?
It very well could, because his strong, very conservative views are something that, can you get that moderate? Can you get that 40% in the middle, that 35% of the middle of the voting spectrum? You got your 30 to 35 strong R's, 30 to 35 strong D's. Everybody's vying for that middle group to try to get them to come your way. So, I don't know that he has that.
Do you think that there is one candidate who could out-debate Barack Obama?
No.
Just flat out no?
Flat, no.
Not even Newt?
Not even Newt. That's one thing about, President Obama. I've been fortunate enough to know, pretty well for the last 6 years, that he can talk. He can express his opinion and give you his views and his values very, very well, in my opinion.
Okay. We're going to take a break now for messages from our sponsors. But first, here is the Peorian's own Kevin Kaiser to talk about what's going on in the literary and culinary world.
Good morning, Peoria and beyond. Today, another edition of Kevin Reads Stuff So You Don't Have To. This week, it's the book Guerrilla Leader, T.E. Lawrence and the Arab Revolt. Considering the turmoil in the Middle East, it's somewhat astounding to consider that about 90 years ago, the entire Arab region was unified under the guidance of a single man, and a gangly Brit at that. That man was T.E. Lawrence, better known as Lawrence of Arabia. While Middle Eastern history isn't typically a strong suit for most, this is one story with which many Americans are familiar. But credit isn't due to our sterling educational system so much as Hollywood, thanks to the 1962 epic film starring Peter O'Toole, Alec Guinness, and Anthony Quinn. In general, the film stays true to the real story, mainly because the real story is quite amazing. Blowing up trains and harassing supply lines with dynamite, Lawrence drove the mighty armies of the Ottoman Turks to distraction and brought the Arabs to the brink of self-determination. But how did an obscure officer with no working knowledge of the art of war gain the trust and respect of a loosely affiliated cluster of desert tribes and unite them in a single cause? It's because he understood that any type of military hierarchy from the West would be a recipe for disaster in a world where tribal systems and warriors lead entire communities, not just other fighters. This book provides a detailed account of the Arab revolt Lawrence led during World War I. For 2 years, he led the Arab warriors as they battled the Turks unconventionally through desert raids on camels and by dynamiting trains. By harassing and making life tough for the Turks, Lawrence helped pave the way for the British push northward. He and his Arab warriors ultimately linked up with the British Army, led by General Edmund Bull Allenby, for the final push to Damascus, toppling the Ottoman Empire. After the victory in Damascus, Lawrence did something that many since haven't been able to do. He created a successful provisional government that lasted without intervention for 2 years. What's even more impressive is that he literally did it overnight. Now, this is an incredible story and a real page-turner. It also has the occasional unintentionally funny sentence like, he traded in his Ford for a used camel. So there you have it, another edition of Kevin Reads Stuff So You Don't Have To. And as always, you're welcome.
We're back talking about the 2012 election season with Billy Halstead, chairman of the Peoria County Democrats. Billy, it seems that with all the discord on Capitol Hill these days and President Obama's decision to kind of distance himself from Congress, is every incumbent member of Congress a little more vulnerable this year?
Well, I don't know if vulnerable is a word, but I'm just saying this year is a different election cycle with everything that's going on. So with your inability to compromise and work with the president will give the Democratic Party a chance to ask you why you're not working with the president. You know, on trying to support programs or, you know, the things that he's trying to get. Whether you agree, you don't have to support him 100%. We understand that, but something that needs to be done, like shutting the government down. Why should we ever talk about that? Let's get together and make sure that doesn't happen. That should be done.
Would you say that if ever there was a time to make sure, whether you're Republican Party or Democratic Party, to make sure you've got somebody running against an incumbent, is this the year to do it?
You have to look at every race different. I mean, do you want to, you know, granted it's always nice for both parties. I'm sure the GOP will say the same thing, or the Republican Party will say that, you know, they always want to have somebody in that slot to run. But assets and having the capabilities of getting a campaign together, you got to pick and choose on where you're going to fight your battles, you know, for lack of better words. Is there one out there that's more vulnerable than the other one? And so you want to make sure you put your resources and assets toward, make sure you try to win that one instead of stretching way out there and knowing that you got a very slim chance of winning another one.
Well, let's switch gears a minute. Let's switch to the state house.
Okay.
The mess in Springfield. Different kind of messes in Congress, but it's still a mess in Springfield. Should the General Assembly incumbents feel vulnerable as well?
Oh, definitely. I mean, definitely when your state's broke, you know, as we are, when your state's broke, you're going to have these issues, you know, for sure. And one thing that I want to make sure that I mention, we're not broke because of things that happened this year, last year, 4 years ago, or 8 years ago. This has been happening for, you know, 30, 40 years, the way the spending was. This wasn't just during the Blagojevich era, the Quinn era. You know, we need to go back and look at some of the things that were done before that put us in this situation that we're in now. But at the same time, it doesn't matter. We're there. We're in that situation, so we have to find a way to get out of it.
What will the effect of redistricting have on some of these races?
I don't know. It's in the local races, you mean? Well, I mean, the problem with that is, on redistricting here, I've been through one of them, confusion. Where do I live? Whose district am I in? That's where we get involved. And, you know, our party will get involved in a way that we're going to work hard to make sure you know what district you're in, because your polling place is probably going to be the same.
Okay.
Polling places, the city of Peoria is not changing their precincts until after the election.
Okay.
The county changed some of theirs. They even added 20 precincts. So that's a little different in the county, but in the city of Peoria, they're not changing their boundaries on their precincts. So your voting places will be the same. So therefore, it's, you know, that's the problem with redistricting, is just a confusion. Is it sway one way or the other during this time? Maybe for some, maybe not for some.
I mean, I've heard it said on the federal level that the redistricting probably solidified Aaron Schock's hold on 18th Congressional District. Do you see that happening in any other districts, either party?
The 17th, I mean, we all know what the 17th looked like. And it was kind of like Senator Durbin said this morning, that where he lives in Springfield, and I know where he lives, he said, if I look to the south, north, east, or west, I could look at 4 other districts. So
Wow.
where he lives was right where all that came together. So I think the 17th being more all in one, typically one area. It goes west and then north, kind of. So it's more that you could define area that I think is better for us because of the, numerous reasons. The 17th has 3 major cities in Rockford, Quad Cities, and Peoria, and all fairly good union towns. Working class people in them that hopefully gets out and votes this election. So, and in the 18th congressional, in which I live in, it probably did solidify Shocks a little bit more.
Okay.
Sometimes that had to happen to get the other. So,
Thank you for being with us.
thank you, Paul, as always.
Thank you for watching today, and remember, this episode can be seen in its entirety on thepeorian.com. And join us next week on WHOI. Have a good week.
Música